Are the Steelers dead yet? Like, really? Are they dead? We've been trying to see if that ghost has been shoved in that casket for 4 years? Ever since Ben had that little elbow injury, we've been trying to make sure that they were buried, gone, dead. But they come back and they win 11 games. Or they come back and they go 500 with Duck and Mason. Or they come back and they make the wild card and almost get the sack record because a quarterback don't know how to get rid of the ball in proper time. So I'm going to bring in somebody who knows the Steelers better than most people I know to talk about this and talk about whether the Steelers are dead or not and should we be afraid of these Steelers, Mr. Tony Serino. How are you doing today, Tony?
I'm doing well. Steelers never dead. And by the way, TJ Watt did break the sack record. Well, actually, he tied the sack record. Yeah. So he has it. He has the record now.
But he's what team is he on? PFF.
He is a third team All Pro, according to PFF. Yeah. Second team All Pro. Third best edge rusher of 2020.
But there's two spots though, right?
For 2021. That's right. That's right.
So he's behind Myles Garrett and who? Mm-hmm.
And Max Crosby of all people. Yeah.
Max Crosby.
Yeah.
You heard it here from Tony Serino's mouth. Max Crosby better than TJ.
Better player. Yeah.
You know, Myles Garrett, obviously, right?
Obviously.
But, you know, a lot to be said about the Steelers, right? Because I think people have said this with the AFC West, right? Just because of the star power at quarterback, right? Oh, there's Derek Carr. Oh, there's Russell Wilson. Oh, there's Justin Herbert, who you hilariously have a great opinion about the Chargers there. And there's obviously Patrick Mahomes. And they look at AFC North, Deshaun Watson now. We don't know how many games he's going to play. You look at Lamar Jackson, former MVP. I mean, Joe Burrow looked like an MVP in the playoffs last year. And then you look at Pittsburgh and everybody goes Mitchell Trubisky. But quiet as kept. The team's not that bad around Mitchell Trubisky, right? There's some holes there most certainly, but if the Steelers are the last place team in your division, you have a really, really strong division, not because they're the Steelers and I believe in this organizational stuff that they be spouting and all that propaganda, but because, you know.
That's just true, though. That's just true.
They have a defensive player of the year on the roster, right? Like they have good players on that roster. It's not this isn't like when the Browns were throwing out like Courtney Brown and finishing in fourth place. Like, of course that made sense. So that being the position that the Steelers are in, right, where they were a playoff team last year, but everybody is looking at them assuming that they're going to be this fourth place basement dwelling team. Where are Steelers fans at with the expectations for this year, you know, and the expectations for Mitchell Trubisky?
Yeah, I think that there is a confidence with this team. You know, they lose Ben Roethlisberger, and obviously everyone outside of Pittsburgh and even within Pittsburgh, right, has been within Pittsburgh. We've been dreading the day that Ben Roethlisberger retires because then you go into kind of this, you know, this quarterback carousel of who's going to be the next guy. Of course, you know, everybody outside of Pittsburgh has been cheering for the day Ben Roethlisberger retires. But when you look at what happened last season, you know, and how bad Ben Roethlisberger was for the majority of the year, and the fact that the Steelers were still able to win 9 games, right? They were still a playoff team in this new, you know, 7 teams make the playoffs per conference. I think there is a confidence that, hey, you know what? Mitchell Trubisky may not be a great quarterback. And no, he's probably not on the level of Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson or Deshaun Watson in his own division. But when you have a football team that just went 9-7 and now you're upgrading potentially at quarterback because Mitchell Trubisky could be better than Ben Roethlisberger, then yeah, I think that there is some confidence there. Now, you know, I think for me, you know, look, the Steelers were a 9-win football team last year, but you wouldn't really tell it if you just watched all 17 games without knowing the final scores and just said, okay, what would you say the record of that team should have been? I think they probably played more like a 6 or 7 win team than a 9-win team. That's why I think this team with Mitchell Trubisky could actually improve in 2022, but potentially have a worse record because I'm just not sure that you look back at how that team won games last year. They were mentally strong down the stretch. I'm not sure going from a veteran like Ben Roethlisberger to someone like Mitchell Trubisky is going to make them that as successful in the kind of dire moments of the game when games are really won and lost in the National Football League.
Yeah, I think you brought it up on AFC North Talk the last time we were on, where you were saying that the clutch moments really are what gave the Steelers that winning record, if you look
Yeah.
at it, right? And we know that Ben, as much as I hate to admit it, he is a pretty clutch quarterback. And you go to Mitchell Trubisky, track record there is a little bit more dicey, right? So it's one of those situations to where we tend to look at things in the offseason as if we are playing Madden or playing a video game, right? Where it's like, well, this guy's a 72 overall, if this guy's a 77 overall, so we're going to win 5% more games because of that, right?
Right.
But it doesn't always work out like that because some players are better at more important things in more important areas than other players are. And Ben, even at the end of his career, could still pull out a clutch moment or two out of his old, dusty, arthritis elbowed, written hands. But it is something to be aware of. Now, one of the things that's kind of the difference between the comparison, right, is comparing this Steelers team coming up to the Steelers team that won 8 games with Duck and Mason. Yeah. But you've noticed that there was a little bit of a difference there when it comes to the defense. What's different from that defense from that year to what this defense is going to be transitioning to now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that defense back then was absolutely, they were elite. I mean, that was a top 5 defense that was great at not only getting to the quarterback but turning the ball over. They led the league by far that season in takeaways. And the question mark for this team, as this team starts to transition to a world without an elite quarterback, and what do you want to look like? I think that is the mold. I think they want to be a team that exists like the 2019 team, but in order to do that, to play elite defense. And you look at the playmakers that team had, right? The Bud Duprees, the Mike Hiltons, those guys are no longer with the football team. Even like Steven Nelson had a fantastic year back in 2019. Joe Hayden, that was probably his last truly great season as a corner. He's kind of, obviously now I don't think he's signed anywhere. So the Steelers have to get back to playing elite defense. There's a lot of guys that need to step up in order for that to happen. Look, TJ Watt is playing at an elite level. Cam Hayward, I would argue, is playing at an elite level. And Minkah Fitzpatrick is capable of playing at an elite level, although last year he was put in some really bad spots, especially by that run defense. So, look, they've got to see improvement from the cornerback play, first and foremost, and they've got to see improvement on that defensive line. Their run defense last year was absolutely atrocious. Now, they're in all likelihood going to get Stephon Tuitt back this year. That's going to be huge for them. They need to shore up the nose tackle position. They need to see better inside linebacker play, right? There's all these things that need to happen, but I think they desire, like you said, they desire to be that team in 2019. That was elite defense. The Steelers last year were just a kind of an above average defense. There's a long way for them to go from where they are today to being an elite defense again.
So what's the difference? Well, what have the Steelers done in this offseason for those who haven't been really paying that much attention? Where have they improved in your minds, and where do you think they have really taken a hit, if anywhere?
I think so. Keeping on the defensive side, I think that they improved at inside linebacker when they got Miles Jack. I think that was a great signing for them because it gives you, the Steelers are in this weird spot at inside linebacker where look, they traded up for Devin Bush 3 years ago. They felt like he was going to be, the Brian Shazier of this defense. The athleticism that he brought, the profile that he had at Michigan would translate to the Steelers when they wanted that playmaker in the middle of the field. He really has not been that player. Now you'll say, okay, well maybe it was the ACL injury. ACL or not, the guy has just not lived up to the 10th overall pick in the NFL draft, and it has caused issues kind of down the line where, look, he's not a great run defender, and that hurt last year because they didn't have a great defensive line. They needed someone in the middle of that defense to shore up the running game, and obviously a 5'11", 220 linebacker is not going to be that guy. But they also couldn't keep him on the field on passing down. So Miles Jack, putting him alongside Devin Bush now, should hopefully give this team a presence in the middle of the field that they haven't had in quite a while, quite honestly. So I thought that was a good signing for them. I thought the Levi Wallace signing was a very Steelers signing, kind of an under the radar type of player from Buffalo, but a kind of do everything type corner who fits exactly what the Steelers want. He's going to come in and maybe be a depth or rotational piece, but gives the Steelers a little more stability there at corner. And then I thought, the offensive line, look, they didn't do a ton on the offensive line. They got 2 players, James Daniels and Mason Cole. James Daniels being the big player, the big name there from Chicago. I think those 2 players, solidify spots on the interior of the line where they really had problems last year. Where they have holes right now are two spots. Wide receiver, massive hole because they lost Juju, James Washington, Ray McLeod, and they have signed exactly 0 wide receivers. Unless they think Gunnar Olszewski, or however you pronounce it, their new kick returner, is going to play slot receiver for them. I just don't know where they're going to go. Maybe Anthony Miller, the former Chicago Bear who played with Mitchell Trubisky. That could be an option, I guess.
Get that one going again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. They have a real need at wide receiver. And then safety. They have they did not re-sign Terrell Edmonds. Edmonds hasn't signed anywhere. You keep hearing these rumors that they're all in on Tyrann Mathieu. I'm not so sure that they are because he doesn't fit the profile of the kind of youth that the Steelers are bringing in. But right now, when you kind of put together a depth chart, who's playing alongside Minka, I don't know. I don't think that player's on the roster today. And so it leaves big openings here at wide receiver and safety.
Yeah. They're in a weird position, and then they're also in this position, at least Steelers fans are, and the Steelers organization most definitely is, where they're sitting here and they're, if you're the Steelers, you're trying to maintain at the very least, right? Like get back to the wild card. Or
right.
Maybe like this isn't a team that's built to just lose, right? They're not going to get the number 1 overall pick. They're not that bad of a team, not under Mike Tomlin, and especially with Brian Flores. Like those two dudes have not lost when they were supposed to lose ever. So like I wouldn't expect them to lose a lot right now. And then you look at the rest of the AFC North. You know what Baltimore can do, and you know that they were very, 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 very injured last year, and that they could be bouncing back up. You look at Cleveland, and, the biggest question mark about Cleveland has been, great roster, don't know about the quarterback. Now, you don't know about the quarterback's availability this year, but when he does play, you do know who that guy is, right? You know that he's going to be good enough to get to those expectations if the Browns don't have catastrophic injuries. And then you look at the Bengals, who shocked everybody and went to the Super Bowl, and then added a pretty good offseason on top of that. What's the Steeler fan morale right now watching all these other teams, make these big moves? Well, not the Ravens. The Ravens ain't signed nobody yet, but, we going to leave that one for a Graven. But, watching these other teams either get huge pieces back from last year that they didn't get, or adding huge pieces, La'el Collins, Amari Cooper, Deshaun Watson, and the Steelers are sitting there trying to figure out how to make sure that they can keep their head above water. Is that something that the fan base has noticed and has kind of affected how people think of things? And also, organizationally, is this something that they are aware of and kind of concerned about? I
think certainly, yeah. I mean, as a fan of the team, I kind of like it a little bit. I like this Steeler team going into the year very under the radar. I mean, there are no expectations for the Pittsburgh Steelers other than you should probably finish 4th in this division now. I mean, you looked back at last year. I mean, going to the play on the field, they probably should have finished last in the division last year based on just how poor they were specifically on the offensive side of the ball. But they somehow won 9 games, and I think that I think is, for me, that's the fun part here, is getting to play spoiler right now. Look, the Steelers are in a transitionary period, right? They've gone from having this Super Bowl window with Ben Roethlisberger, and now they're in this transitionary period where, okay, they need to find the next Ben Roethlisberger, because until they do that, they can play spoiler, they can make the playoffs every once in a while, but they're never really going to be a true contender. But when you're in a division with three teams and 3 fan bases that all feel like they're squarely in that window. I mean, you got the Bengals, who just made it. They have a whole roster full of rookie contracts, right? So they can just go out and get whatever free agents they want. The Browns, we know, are an absolutely loaded roster and have been, and now they finally got their quarterback. And then you've got the Ravens, who have kind of been living on this dream ever since the 15-1 year with Lamar, where they feel like they have a top 5 guy, and they certainly should always be in the race for the Super Bowl. I love the idea that my Pittsburgh Steelers can come in, and all we got to do is finish 3rd, and there's going to be a heartbroken fan base out there who's like, how did we, with this roster, finish below the Pittsburgh Steelers in the standings? And that brings me joy, Quincy. That brings me joy.
Steeler fans, man. Can't stand them, can't live with them, can't live without them. That is an interesting point that you bring up, right? If the Steelers finish 3rd place, somebody's getting fired, right? Like,
that's right. I don't know how you get around it. How do you keep going when you're like, We got a loaded roster. We finished behind Mitchell Trubisky.
I can't imagine, like, unless Watson is suspended for the whole year or something like that, there is no scenario in which any of these teams finish in fourth place and keep their coach, right? That has to finally be it for John Harbaugh if he finishes in fourth place 2 years in a row. Like, we know these extensions mean nothing when it comes to coaches because they don't hit on the cap, so they'll just fire him and pay him forever. You know what I mean? And then he'll go work with his brother in Michigan for like a couple of years. And then Zach Taylor, if he finishes in fourth place with a healthy Joe Burrow, that's it for him, right? Like, it's got to be a wrap. It's Mike Brown, so it might not be, but every other team would fire him at that point, right? And then, let it be Kevin Stefanski finish in fourth place after finishing in third for the last 2 years. Well, last 2 years, having a disappointing season, adding that on, he's not going to be safe there. So, Tony is right. All they have to do is to get to third place, and somebody's going to burn.
That's right. And then I just get to watch the tears and the fire of an entire fan base turning on everyone.
And we just go, look, this might end up being put in Sonny's video. We know how this goes on AFC North Talk. But if it's the Ravens that finish in fourth place, that's not going to be good for anybody because they still ain't signed Lamar Jackson. Right? Like, they still got that contract situation in limbo. And there's not a lot of love about that coaching staff within the team and the city right now. Like, they are not in love with that whole situation there. So could you imagine they let Lamar Jackson go and bring back John? Like,
listen, you said no one would be happy about that. I could think of one person who would be happy.
No. There would be three people. There would be three people.
Exactly. I am quietly confident that, look, the Steelers are probably not going to be a great team in 2022, but I'm pretty sure they're not going to finish fourth. And that's hilarious.
That's wow. That I haven't thought about that. That is going to be the funnest thing to watch all year. Make sure you watch AFC North Talk because Tony's going to revel in all of that joy. By the way, I've had this prediction out. I'm going to say it on my channel. I don't think I said it here. I think the most LOL thing about this year, or the LOL Steeler thing, is they're going to be in first place by the end of the second month of this year, of the season.
I've heard you say this. I actually disagree with you. I think they're probably going to be stronger in the second half of the year than they are in the first half. But I want to get your take on the first half.
I think I think Mike Tomlin and that offensive staff of Matt Canada will figure out something to get not good offense out of there, but good enough offense. And then you know that they're going to squeeze whatever juice out that defense that they got. And it's going to take people a little bit by surprise. Again, the Steelers are fighting under the radar. And then teams aren't going to come in trying to play the Steelers super hard. And I think Mitchell Trubisky is good enough to where I think teams will underestimate him, and he's good enough to take advantage of that, right? Like, people are looking at Mitch like he was garbage in Chicago. He wasn't great, but he wasn't bad, right? It would be similar to if you like had Baker Mayfield over there, right? Where Baker can beat you if you don't pay him proper respect. So I think some teams are going to get thrown off by that. The Steelers also are just competent at the end of the day, and competence can win football games, especially early in the year. Competence, it won them 11 in a row in 2020, right? Just simply being competent can win football games, and I think that's going to play into it, especially at the beginning of the year where teams are especially incompetent and trying to figure things out, especially with all the movement going on. I think that's why. And also the Tony curse, man. Whenever Tony puts his Twitter avatar, acts like he falls in love with the player, that player has a great first 8 weeks of the season, and then you never, ever hear about him again. Yeah, he wore a James Pierre shirt. And James Pierre was hot them first 8 weeks, and then he stunk after that. But getting into some of the young players in the draft, you seem to be pretty certain that the Steelers are heading in a direction in the draft. What direction is that?
Quarterback. Yeah, I think that this is a team that they kind of wear their draft pick on their sleeve, you could say. It's a lot of teams go into the draft and they have to kind of, read the tea leaves and whatnot and try to figure out what's smoke and what's not smoke about where their team is headed. We Steeler fans do not have to do that. Okay. When Mike Tomlin says we're going to upgrade X during this offseason, or when Art Rooney says we're going to upgrade X during this offseason, that's what they're going to do. I mean, they're not trying to blow smoke and we're going to say we're going to do one thing so that no one knows we're doing this other thing. No. This is a team that's gone into this offseason and made no secret about the fact that they are absolutely in love with Malik Willis and his play. And they have, at every chance they've gotten throughout this process, whether it be the Senior Bowl, whether it be the Combine, whether it be his pro day, or bring him into Pittsburgh, they have kind of tried to get as much information about this kid as they can. And they've done this in the past with guys like Devin Bush. They did this last year with Najee Harris. When Steelers fans went into last year's draft class knowing that Najee Harris was number 1 on the Steelers board. It was just a question of if he's going to be there. I think the similar thing going into this year, I know Malik Willis is number 1 on the Steelers board. There's no doubt in my mind. The only question is, how high are they willing to trade up to go get him? Because I don't think he's going to be there at 20. And then the next question in my mind, when we talk about quarterback, is, okay, they like Malik Willis a lot. Who's number 2 on their board? Who's number 3 on their board? And how far is the drop off between those guys, right? Is it Malik Willis no matter what? Or is it, we like Malik Willis, we also kind of like Desmond Ridder. And you know what? If Kenny Pickett's there, we take him too. And oh, by the way, you know what? Sam Howell, not a terrible player. If he was at 20, we take him. And hey, you know what, Matt? That's where I start to get a worry, Quincy, is I just worry, how deep is the board? I know they like the top end of it, but how much they like those guys like Corral and Howell, and are they willing to take those guys at 20? Because that might be a little worrisome.
Let's go at your gut feeling. We're going to go through these quarterbacks. All right, you're going to tell me, what do you think the Steelers take them? And then tell me if you want the Steelers to take them. All right. Let's say, because the only way you get Malik Willis is a trade up, right?
Trade up, yeah.
Yeah. Trade up, get Malik Willis. Are you for or against?
Oh, I'm absolutely for that. I would put it at like 50-50 today if I think that's actually going to happen, because he'd have to fall to a certain spot, yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about guys who fall to what pick? 20?
20.
Yeah. Kenny Pickett.
I think they would take Kenny Pickett. I would not like it. I would very. And here's the thing. I'm a fan of the team.
Hey,
would I talk myself into it? Would I talk myself into it? Of course I would talk myself into it.
The last 2 times, it's kind of worked out, right? Like, because Chase Claypool was a little better than you expected. Pratt Freiermuth.
Freiermuth, I was way off on. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So maybe Kenny Pickett and those small hands. Look, the big excuse is he threw the ball at Heinz Field already, right? So them small hands wasn't a problem with that win. It's a bigger football in the NFL. I think people forget that one. But, hey, it might work out. Old 2 gloves over there in the AFC North.
Yeah. Well, okay, but that part of it though, Quincy.
Yeah,
look, he played at Pitt.
He played at Pitt. I get it. He played at Pitt. He also for 3 years had less than 15 touchdowns a year.
Yeah. No, he's a 1-year wonder. I mean, he's a 5-year player. He's played for 5 years in college, and he's a 1-year wonder.
Who has more touchdowns? Who has more touchdowns? Does Joe Burrow get more touchdowns in his 2 years at LSU than he has in his
probably.
5?
I would guess, yes. Well, although Kenny threw like 40 last year, so
yeah, but Joe threw like 55 something. His
no, either 60, right? 60, I believe, in his junior year, or senior year, whatever it was. I think he threw 60 that year.
And does that include the playoff?
Yeah, that includes the playoff.
I
think he threw 60
in college. 60 of them. That's an insane amount of touchdowns.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many touchdowns did Kenny Pickett throw that exact same year? Because they were both in college, right? Starting.
Oh yeah, he probably threw like 12.
All right. Matt Corral at 20.
Everyone keep getting people tweeting at me. Quincy, they're always like, "Oh, he's the one that fits the system the best. He actually fits Canada's system the best." Look, I just watched Matt Canada for a year.
Zone read option, everybody fits it.
I mean, if you're drafting Corral because he really fits the system, not because you really believe he can be a franchise guy, it's the wrong reason. I'll say no, the Steelers don't get him, and I'm going to be very relieved because I'm worried. I'm worried about this one.
That's remember Cam Newton was coming out, people were telling themselves, well, who was it? Was it Blaine Gabbert? They were like, look, he just fits the NFL system better.
Yeah, exactly.
Cam Newton.
Yeah. That didn't work out.
System fits can be overrated at times, right? It's just massively overrated. Don't talk yourself into a mediocre player because he fits your system. Okay, we got 3 down.
Yep.
Desmond Ridder.
Okay, Ridder, I think if he's there, I think the Steelers do take him. I think the Steelers have Ridder 2 on their board. I wouldn't love this, but once again, like the Kenny Pickett thing, I like it probably more than Kenny Pickett, and I'd probably talk myself into it again. I'd probably talk myself into it.
Here's all I'll say about Desmond Ridder. He seems like the nicest guy in the world, seems like a great leader. All those things are true about Desmond Ridder. I've also watched Desmond Ridder play for 2 years because I've been interested in this Luke Fickell University of Cincinnati football program. It's not good when I've watched a dude play for 2 years and his combine numbers just shock me.
Exactly.
He runs how fast? I've never seen him do that.
He's got a relative athletic score of like 9.7 or something. He's like one of the greatest quarterback athletes we've ever seen. And then you put it on a tape and you're like, where? You
watch him against Alabama, you're like, seemed like a 4A against Alabama.
The thing about Ritter's tape is it always felt to me like there was another level that he was about to get to, and that just never happened. It just never happened. And I don't feel like, what you want out of a college quarterback is at least the glimpse. Show me the glimpse. Show me every once in a while. It's like, whoa, hold on. You can do that. Okay, that we can build on. I never even see that from Ridder, and that's what I worry about.
My concern is that he plays it safe all the time.
Yep.
And I don't know if you can get yourself. It's kind of like a Derek Carr thing, where that was Derek Carr's thing. But Derek Carr showed you glimpses at Fresno State, which Desmond Ridder has not. But Derek Carr, he runs pretty fast 42. He ran like a 4.6 40, and incredible arm talent. I think his miles per hour were pretty crazy too. But people have this ideal that like Derek Carr is like a weak arm quarterback and he's slow. And it's like, he's not. He just refuses to use these things, right? And that could be more frustrating, right? I would, there's a reason why Deshaun Watson and Joe Burrow don't have the strongest arms in the world, but they're willing to let it rip and let it go. And that can sometimes be more important than somebody who has all those skill sets, because sometimes you can have that and not do it. And Desmond Ridder, he kind of reminds me of, I would say Derek Carr would probably be his ceiling, right? Like if he ended up being Derek Carr, that would be like excellent for him. Yeah. I think he probably ends up being like a slightly more frustrating and less executing version of Derek Carr, if not worse, because again, that I can't get that Alabama game out my head. He was so bad in that game.
It's
Alabama. Yeah.
It's Bama in the playoffs, so it's tough.
But people were talking about him as the reason that they were in that spot.
I know. Ridder. Their defense was the reason they were in that spot.
Yeah, but the only person I was impressed with was like Sauce, maybe some Kobe Bryant in there.
Yeah.
I did not come away from that thinking Desmond Ridder should go in the first round, but this is the world that we live in right now.
I know.
Let's see, who else is in it? Are we really talking about Sam Howell at 20?
Yes. Yeah, we are. We are because honestly, if you had asked me before the season, all right, Steelers are going to have a pick at 20, who do they take at quarterback? I would have told you Sam Howell. I said, Sam Howell falls 20. That's probably number one on their board. I think going into the year, Sam Howell.
You would have been excited about that in August?
Yeah, exactly. I think Sam Howell was probably the Steelers' number one player on their board going into the 2021 season. And the question is, how do you view the tape there? Because this is the big question about Howell. Howell was thought to be the number one pick going in, but then he has this terrible year and he falls down all these, and now he's potentially a second round pick. Well, okay, they lost a ton of talent around him. I mean, this was an offense that basically had a mass exodus to the NFL. So Howell was the only guy not to leave from that offense, and especially that offensive line is just took a nosedive. He was running for his life and actually did. You'll give him credit. He actually did become a much better runner in 2022 and kind of showed that part of his game. So there is, look, I talk about talking myself into quarterbacks. Well, if I'm going to talk myself into Sam Howell, what I'm going to say is I believe in what he did in 2021 when he's surrounded by more NFL caliber guys in as far as the passing game goes. And then he kind of unlocked this thing in the running game. And so maybe if you put those two things together, you got something. But boy, we are stretching here. If you're asking me if he's there at 20 and would the Steelers take him, this is what I'm most worried about. This is what I'm most worried about is that Corral's gone, Willis is gone, Pickett's gone, Ritter's gone, Howell's still on the board. Yeah, I think the Steelers are going to take Howell, and I'm not going to have a fun time on our live stream.
Is Sam Howell the Justin Ross of quarterbacks?
Yes.
Where you're trying to project all this stuff. By the way, if you draft Sam Howell, and if the Steelers draft Sam Howell, Steelers who have been connected to this Baker Mayfield if he hits free agency thing, how bad you gonna be? because it's like, bro, you could have just had actual meat. Like,
No. I wouldn't. I would not rather have Baker because Baker's got the off the field issues. At least with Howell, we're getting a clean slate when it comes to the attitude, the personality, and all of that. The bag, he doesn't come with the baggage.
I don't know. If people compare him to Baker Mayfield in both ways, like, yeah, he reminds me of Baker Mayfield as a leader. I know what that is.
Yeah.
You just drafting younger Baker Mayfield. At that point, you might as well sign the real deal, Tony. You know?
No.
The question is Duck
I
gonna
want
let
neither
6
one.
go? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I'd rather stay away from Baker Mayfield and Sam Howell and that entire archetype, really. If you ask me.
Serious question though. At what point at quarterback solutions for the Steelers? I mean, you already got Mitchell Trubisky, but at what point do you think the Steelers just punt this till next year?
Okay, this is a great question, and this is my biggest worry. And I'll never know the answer to this question, but what I would love to be is a fly on the wall of this process, because what I care most about when it comes to the Steelers trying to find their next guy is the process by which they're going about doing this. I have this worry. The reason why I think Sam Howell could be a quarterback, the reason why I'm disappointed in the Steelers, could potentially be disappointed in the Steelers, is because I'm worried that their process this year is not let's go find the next great Steeler quarterback, and if he's there, cool. If he's not, we move on. I think their process might be, we need to find a quarterback right now, no matter what. One of these guys, we got to make them the guy, right? And all these guys are first or second round caliber-ish players, so we'll just make one of these guys work. There's this rumor that's been going around that Kevin Colbert, the Steelers general manager, who is going to retire after this draft, wants to leave this team with the next quarterback, right? He doesn't want to retire without getting this team that guy. Oh, no. Now, if that means that they're going to trade the farm away to go to get Malik Willis, fine. Because if they love Malik Willis and they're willing to trade everything away to go get him, fine. Because no one's going to care 5 years from now if he turns into a top 5, top 10 quarterback. No one's going to care how much you traded away to get that guy. But if you sit back and you say, well, we're not going to do that. We're not going to take the guy we love because we kind of like some of these other guys. We'll just sit around and take the best one that's left. That's bad process. And even if, let's say they take Sam Howell and Sam Howell ends up being good, to me, it's just that's a bad process. Now, the reason why I'll never know is because maybe they really do maybe they love Sam Howell. Maybe they really do think Sam Howell could be a franchise type quarterback and not just someone who they like enough to take at 20. Yeah, I'll never know the answer to that question, but that's my worry in this offseason, is that the Steelers' process by which they're going about getting this quarterback is flawed.
Yeah, I'm cheering for it. Sam Howell at 20 sounds good to me. Reach and get Caleb Ellerby and shock everybody at 20. You know what I mean? Like, just go ahead and do it all the way. Look, Desmond Ridder at 20. I have gone on record. Now, look, I'll say this with the caveat. Just because I say something don't mean it's going to happen at all, right? I thought that Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen had so many red flags that you needed to stay away from him. And I thought Josh Rosen was going to translate to the NFL. I am not an authority when it comes to quarterbacks in the NFL draft. I have tied myself to low floor guy to the point to where I'm out on low floor guy. But Desmond Ridder at 20? Dog.
Well, Ridder,
that's the only that you can only talk yourself into that because he had a really strong combine. But yeah, you can't talk yourself into that on tape.
Supposedly, and this is the part of quarterback evaluation that I think it's hard for us to do from this kind of 20,000 foot view, because we never get to talk to these guys. I think that part of the position is so important of who the guy is. Now, according to rumors and whatnot, Ridder is nailing that part of the process. And that's that's driving him up boards.
Because Luke Fickell loves him, and Luke Fickell's like a coach's coach. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, I would bet Desmond Ridder killing it. He's like Russ. Remember Russ was in the Senior Bowl? And everybody came out the Senior Bowl. Boy, that Russell Wilson, he's great. I like that Russell Wilson. He did the Gruden QB camp. And I like that Russell Wilson. And everybody loved that Russ. And Russ still went in the third round. That's a world where Russell Wilson could go in the third round, but Desmond Ridder goes pick 20. That tells you how how we view quarterbacks has drastically changed to where we ain't underestimating anybody for any reason anymore.
Yeah, true. Because Russ only won the third round because he was like what? He's like 5'11".
5'10", yeah. It was like 5'10", 5'11", and he had like a baseball option, so people were kind of scared on that.
Exactly. Yeah, that never happens today.
That would never happen today.
Kyler Murray went 1 overall with kind of this similar. I mean, he obviously had a higher ceiling than or a thought of higher ceiling at the time, but still, all the baseball stuff, all the height stuff was there, and no one cared.
It's interesting now to see like how people are just like, nope, we're not writing off anybody, right? Like how that has changed so quickly to where if you were under 6'2", and didn't have certain things, oh no, we can't draft you. If you had under 9.25-inch hands, oh no, can't draft you the first round. Now you can have 8.25-inch hands. You can be small. You can come out. Small school used to scare people, right? Till Carson Wentz went number 2 overall. Right. Now all of a sudden that don't scare nobody, right? Trey Lance went number 3 last year.
3. Yep.
Yeah, 3, and from the same school. So it is interesting. I mean, it's good for players, right? Because now nothing dumb is going to stop people from evaluating you as a quarterback. But I mean, it can also get people in trouble. In that Desmond Ritter one. Well, now I don't want to just say Desmond Ritter. There are a handful of quarterbacks here that are going to get overdrafted and get somebody fired, right? Because somebody's going to draft somebody who should not be in the top 10. Like, this is what happens when E.J. Emanuel gets drafted like 8th overall or whatever he did that year. That's a pick that gets people fired. Even when it's not a pick that should, it's a pick that gets people fired. And some team's going to be in a position because Malik Willis ain't going to be there past like 5. To get themselves fired. I'm wondering who that team's gonna be, but somebody gonna get fired. I think it's gonna be the Panthers.
It's Matt Rule. I mean, it's Matt Rule. It's the better question is who else besides Matt Rule?
Who is Matt Rule gonna draft that gets himself fired?
Kenny Pickett, by the way.
He's gonna take Kenny Pickett. Hey,
he is.
I hope I'm wrong. But there's Malik.
I have
Willis.
like semi-inside information that tells me Kenny Pickett's their guy.
That's wild. That's wild. I'm just saying, I would not. That's this quarterback class. Interesting, man. We knew it's one of those ones where we knew it's not good. We knew it had issues. As we went through, we saw some of those issues come to light, and we're still like, well, 5 quarterbacks got to go in this first round at some point, right? Like,
Well, they don't. Yeah, I think I'll be interested to see to kind of replay this after the draft because it is. Yeah, I mean. Look, there's a version of the first round that plays out where like only Malik and Kenny go in the first round, and then everyone else is second round, or only Malik and Ritter go in the first round, and everyone else is second round. And like at the end of the day, if that happens, I don't think anyone's going to look at the first round as being too crazy. But once that number gets above 3, once we get the 4th quarterback taken in the first round, then it's like red flag. Because honestly, like in your opinion, how many of these quarterbacks of these 5 guys we're talking about? How many of them are going to get second contracts with their team that drafted them?
Malik Willis is the one I think has a shot to get a second contract with the team that drafts them. I don't believe at all in Kenny Pickett. I think people are really underestimating his ability to be Nate Peterman. I think we have whenever you're telling me this dude has a high floor, I feel like that's a red flag. I've never seen high floor guy work. I've never seen that guy pan out. Brandon Whedon, high floor. Josh Rosen, high floor. You know what I mean? It speaks for itself right there, right?
Yep.
So high floor guy, I'm out on high floor guy. I don't really think Kenny Pickett. Matt Corral, nah, I'm not in on that. Sam Howell, I don't think he gets there. If he gets drafted in the first round, I don't think he sees his 4th year in that contract. And who else is left at? Desmond Ritter? If he gets drafted in the first round?
Yeah.
No, he doesn't get a second. Well, he might get a second contract the same way like Mason Rudolph did, but he's not getting a 5th-year option. Like, if you're asking me anybody here who's going to get their 5th-year option exercising, Malik Willis is the only guy I have any faith that could get his 5th-year option. And even then, I think that's a bit of a gamble because he's a gamble-like prospect, right? You're betting on the ceiling there, which is fine. But everybody else, I feel pretty confident we're not going to see them with the 5th-year option. You know what I mean?
I'm with you. I think that there's more. It's more likely that none of these guys get a second contract than 2 of them do.
And the thing that's the issue is none of these guys are high ceiling guys other than Malik Willis. Like, that's why I'm concerned about this class. Like, Matt Corral might be high ceiling guy.
Corral, yeah, I was just gonna say Corral. You could make arguments, but it's not a good one.
Yeah, and then other than that, it's like Sam Howell. He's kind of a low floor argument, high ceiling maybe because he had so much hype going into that. But you could say the same thing about like Spencer Rattler next year. So I don't know how much weight that holds. You know what I mean? Like, or we've done it with Deshaun Kaiser, right? But at least he was like super high ceiling guy at that point, right? There's no guy like that where you're like, look, it's all raw, other than Malik Willis, where you're like, hey, it's all raw, but it could work. It's like, hey, we saw Kenny Pickett play 5 years of football, and he had one good season, and maybe that's who he is. Like, that's a different bet. I would feel better about this if these were a bunch of guys who maybe had like a year of football that we just don't know if they're going to be good, but boy, can they throw it. You know,
but that goes back to what you were saying of like, you know, look how differently we evaluate the position now, because you and I would much rather have a bunch of Josh Allens in this draft, right? Go back to who Josh Allen was as a college prospect and how people talked about him as he shouldn't even be a second round pick. He should be a fourth round pick. I remember
based on production. That was the big talking point. Based on production, he's the worst quarterback in this whole first round conversation.
Exactly. You can't fix accuracy, all the things we used to say. And now today, right, we look at how quarterback play has evolved and what you need and what it takes to be successful. And we're like, I'd rather have a bunch of the crazy tape that Mahomes put out there, or the crazy tape that Allen put out there, or the crazy tape that Malik Willis put out there. I'd rather have that guy than the guy who's like, oh no, he's safe. This guy I like. This guy goes through his progressions, nice accurate ball. You know, it follows the coach's instructions. I like. You'd rather have the crazy off the wall quarterback than the like by the book, you know, high floor, just going to get it done. You'd much rather have the
high floor is the biggest red flag you could give a single player coming out. Look, he's only gonna be but this bad. No, that's not good. You don't want that. Even Kirk Cousins, nobody would say a high floor when and this is who like the high floor king is Kirk Cousins, right? Everybody points to him as high floor king. He was a high floor king coming in the draft. He was third round pick coming in the draft.
He was a third round pick, yeah.
So I mean, one of these guys might pan out. Like, I think Matt Corral's probably the best bet out of everybody else. We're like, okay, it could work, I guess. It's a toss-up between Matt Corral or Sam Howell, right? Like, if I'm going to be
I would
wrong,
put Ritter in there.
I'm not putting Ritter in there.
You're all the way out. See, I'm already talking
I
about
don't think he has it. I don't think he's going to be willing enough to rip the football enough and throw the football to get past that adjustment in the NFL, right? The thing that concerned me when I watched him play against Alabama wasn't that he looked bad. It looked like he was overwhelmed the whole game by how fast Alabama was. That concerns me, right? When it seems like 11 guys on the field overwhelms you, that's never a good sign. And that's not something that gets fixed with time, right? You can say all you want about Josh Allen. He was never afraid because there were 11 really fast dudes on there.
No.
He was just going to throw the ball really fast, right? Like those high ceiling guys, they let it rip no matter what. They don't feel like they're overpowered at any point. And his combine numbers, like I know that increases stock to a lot of people. To me, that made me even more concerned about him because it's like you can run a 4.5. And you were out here playing against Alabama this scared in the biggest game of your life? I don't trust that. That's something I cannot trust, right? And I just don't have faith that he's going to be anything more than, you know, a very strong backup in this league. And you don't draft that with the 20th pick.
It's an interesting point because it is it's something I always look for in a prospect, especially on the defensive side, right? You always want the guy. That old saying of you'd rather have a guy where you have to tell him to back it off a little bit rather than a guy you have to tell him to turn on, right? You want the guy who's maybe a little overly aggressive and you have to kind of and the guy who's like way passive and you have to teach him how to be aggressive. It's a good point with Ritter where, part of his game is you have to go in there and you almost have to teach him to be aggressive. I don't know if you can do that. Do we have good examples of that?
And it's like also he was passive when he was playing his own conference, which is okay, whatever. It's kind of the system he's in with Luke Fickell, right? You're not asked to take a lot of shots down the field. But then when you're playing Alabama, it seemed like he went to a whole nother level of passiveness. Like I can't count how many times he didn't put the ball in positions for guys to make plays. He had a wide receiver on the team who's going to be a pretty good draft pick with Alec Pierce, right? So it's not like he had nobody or they were outmatched. It was a pretty good Cincinnati team. And it just looked like he was afraid to do anything dangerous with the football. And that can't exist in the NFL. Like if you're afraid to throw college football open, you're not going to be able to fit it into an NFL window, whether you can physically do it or not, because mentally he's going to be one of those dudes that pump fake all the time and take a bunch of bad sacks. Like, that's usually what happens with that. And it's not about processing speed, because that's one thing we always get wrong is processing speed with these guys. Nate Peterman, the most famous example, right? People were like, boy, can he process? And then he was like, he threw 9 interceptions in like 3 games or something like that.
It was absurd. It was absurd.
Two is processing them picks really fast. But yeah, so it's not about processing speed with them. It's just like, how open does somebody have to be to him in the NFL for him to actually throw the football? And if he holds on to that ball, he's going to get hit. And you can't have that, right? The quarterback that takes a ton of sacks and doesn't need to, that guy's out of there super fast, no matter how smart they are. And that's what I worry about with him. Great athlete. I mean, you could talk yourself into it on paper, and especially when you look at it and you look at it without the context, right? You could say he drove Cincinnati to the playoffs. Not necessarily true. Cincinnati has a couple of really good players on that defense that really did most of the work, especially this year when they beat some Power 5 teams. Not saying Desmond Ridder wasn't a part of that. He obviously was. But that was really the driving force, was that Cincinnati defense, if you watch that team all year. And that's just my biggest concern about Ridder is like, man, like, you just don't feel – I don't think you're going to be able to throw the football to the open receiver in the NFL, because you might see it, but I don't know if you trust it.
Right. And, the difference between college open and pro open. Yeah.
And the thing that concerned me is I don't think he really had a good grasp on what was open in college.
Yeah.
Like that's concerning to me, right? And he didn't play in the SEC. And we saw what happened when he played against the SEC team. Like, granted, it's Alabama and he's at Cincinnati, but this is not like Northwestern when they play Alabama the third game. He had a capable team there. It's concerning because when you watch him against his conference, he didn't really trust open, and then he really didn't trust open versus Alabama. So what's going to happen if he plays in the NFL? When he plays in the NFL, is he going to trust open? We'll see in the preseason, right? If he's more willing to rip it and throw it, that's a good sign. But if we get to week 3 of the preseason and he's still holding on to the football and kind of worried and scared he's going to make a mistake, then – and then you add that on top of the pressure of if he's a first-round pick when he really, like, if he wants, I think you can only get Desmond Ridder to be good if he's like a third-round pick, because the more pressure that he has on him early, I think that's going to be detrimental to his success. I think it's better for him in the long run to be a third-round pick. But, yeah, go ahead.
And that's something the Steelers have going for them is that they are going to be able to, whoever they draft, if they do draft a quarterback, they'll have the luxury at least of sitting potentially for a little while behind Trubisky. Now, you could easily envision a scenario where Trubisky is terrible for the first 4 games, and that only lasts for a month. But
now that's a year I would want the Steelers to have hard knocks, is when if they draft Desmond Ridder, and you got to see Mike Tomlin be like, will you just throw the damn football? Because that's one thing Mike Tomlin is not going to tolerate, is you being scared to throw the football.
Oh, for sure.
For sure. That's tough on the list. That's why he liked Ben. Ben was not afraid to ever throw the football, ever, anywhere in his life. And that's why he rolled with him. I don't know what he gonna do with the dude that don't like to throw the football. And that's why Mason Rudolph been on the team for so long, because Mason would throw that thing anywhere.
Yeah, but it is an interesting thing to talk, like, when you look at the last 2 seasons of Ben Roethlisberger, like, ever since that team with Duck and Mason, the Steelers have offensively, and people blame this on Ben and his arm strength and all of that, right? They don't throw deep down the middle of the field. Everything is very safe. It's a quick throw. It's all of that. And, the fact that never changed between that 2019 season with Mason and Duck, and then it continued with Ben when he came back, and then they changed offensive coordinators, and it continued again. It's one thing I want to watch from this new Matt Kennett offense with Trubisky. He's got an arm. Certainly this team should be able to throw deep and over the middle of the field again. But those are also the riskier throws. And when you're talking about a team that's built to run the ball and play defense, the one thing you don't want to do, the one thing you can't do, is you can't make the risky throw. You can't turn the ball over, because I don't care how good your defense is. I don't care how good your running game is. You go down 14-0 early, it's a wrap.
It is a wrap. All right. Speaking of wraps, I think it's going to wrap up this conversation about the Steelers' future. Will they be dead yet? And also, I think we just did a nice little wrap up of these quarterbacks if you were interested in.
That's right.
I think we did like a good 30 on them. So that's going to be it for me. Make sure you check out Tony at Steelers Country. And also, Tony is on AFC North Talk with me, Sonny, and Ace. So make sure you guys check that out every week. We go live. And during the season, we even go live twice a week. Props are suggested. So for me, for Tony, that's going to be it for today's show. You guys have a great day. Have a good night.